Good morning. First thing I would say is that our thoughts and prayers go out to those in Connecticut over this absolutely unspeakable, horrific tragedy. We'll say that on a personal note, as a grandfather of two 6-year-olds who go to school every day, security is one of our top issues. I expect that my 6-year-old grandkids will come home safe every day. We even have in the audience today members of the Tulsa Public Schools Board of Education. They have set as one of our primary 5 strategic goals for Tulsa Public Schools as security and safety. Safety and security is always at the forefront of our thinking. When events like this happen, as what has happened in Connecticut, it does cause us to very carefully assess everything we are doing to ensure that our students are as safe as possible. With me this morning is Tulsa Public Schools Police Chief Gary Reddick. We have a police department of 23 certified police officers. Police Chief Reddick will be available to answer questions and will also make comments about safety. Also with me this morning is the City of Tulsa Mayor Bartlett and his police chief, Chuck Jordan, the police chief of the City of Tulsa. Mayor Bartlett and I have had extensive discussion over the weekend. We already have measures in place. We're already paying attention to safety and to security, but we ask ourselves, are we doing everything possible? Are there more things that we need to do at this heightened time that has brought attention to this issue? So we decided to have a press conference this morning, talk about what we are doing, put our police chiefs up here and have them answer questions about what we're doing with security. So at this time, I will ask Mayor Bartlett if he will step up and he will make a comment, and then we will have our police chiefs who will be available for question and answers, as will Mayor Bartlett and I. Mayor Bartlett, thank you for being here this morning.
Dr. Ballard, thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday morning, Sunday morning, Victoria and I attended the Tulsa Bible Church, and we heard some beautiful music from their choir and their orchestra. And I could just imagine that the hymns we were singing were really the voices of those 20 souls, those 20 children, those 6 teachers that were telling us that we're safe. We're safe now. Everything's okay with us now. Don't worry. Dr. Ballard and I, it's our job now to make certain that our children and our teachers and our administrators in and around the city of Tulsa and the Tulsa public school system and the other schools in our community, that they are safe. That when they are dropped off in the morning and picked up in the afternoon at the bus stop at the church, when they enter their church to teach our children, that they end the day like we all expect them, safe, sound, in good spirits, looking towards the future. That's why we call this press conference, to introduce to you our chiefs of police, to make certain that our community is confident that we are delivering that safety message. We are available for questions and discussions. I'd like to call on the chiefs now to make a statement if they like. Is that okay? Yeah. So, our chiefs of police.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me just say that in reviewing our own procedures and the issues of school safety, I'd like to deal with a couple of facts. And the first fact is that since 1992, school violence in America has actually declined. That should make people feel a little bit better about the road that we're traveling here as a society. We've taken a lot of steps, and Tulsa in particular took some steps 5 years ago to make a significant investment in the safety of children. One of those was the creation of a campus law enforcement agency that was active on the campuses, and in the 2010 bond issue to make millions of dollars of investment in security equipment. Additionally, as you're going to hear from Chief Jordan, there's going to be even more cooperation in the future. This had already been planned between the Tulsa Police Department and Tulsa Public Schools. Communication issues are going to increase as we've made significant investments through grants and general fund dollars to help us get to the place where when there's an issue of concern on Tulsa Public Schools property, that every resource is brought to bear effectively and efficiently. I can't overstate enough how much I appreciate the cooperation from the Tulsa Police Department. And as I was telling the mayor when we came up here, cooperation like this does not come overnight, but it's based on relationships. And because of the relationship between Tulsa police officers and the people who serve in the Tulsa Public Schools Campus Police Department, and because of my relationship with Chief Jordan, I am confident that we have every resource available and that we're taking every step that we possibly can and continue to review those practices and policies to keep children safe. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to echo everything that Chief Ruddick said. We're going to have as good a collaboration as you can possibly have in any two organizations between ourselves and Tulsa Public Schools Police Department. We're doing a lot of things today, starting today and throughout the week, that's going to provide an increased presence at all of our public schools. In the next few days, every public school will be visited by a police officer. If they have any questions about security that are outside the training, which is exemplary, by the way, for our school teachers, or any questions about how we respond, anything like that, we're going to be able to answer those for those teachers and those educators. I also have two granddaughters that went to school this morning, and I think all of us know somebody. This is something that's touched everybody in our country, everybody in our city. Like I say, I just want to assure you that we are going to provide a greater presence. I'm not going to answer any questions about how or what we're going to do. Obviously, security is security, and that's something we're not going to talk about. I'll just tell you that we are going to provide a greater presence. We're going to make ourselves completely accessible to teachers and educators to try and come up with some other solutions. If we see any kind of a lapse or if we see anything we can do better, we're going to find a solution for it. So, thank you.
As for Tulsa Public Schools, this morning we did send messages to all of our teachers, encouraging them if they have any questions, if they have any suggestions, any assistance they might need, whether it be counseling assistance or if there's something that they could bring to our attention where we think security could be increased, then we will do that. Before we open for questions, I will just say that the actions of those in Connecticut who worked in the building, the principal, the school psychologist, and teachers, is entirely consistent with the servant's mentality, with the servant's heart mentality that all teachers and building administrators that I have known throughout my career. I would like especially for us to remember those who are with children right now, those teachers who are with children and allaying their fears and assuring them that they are safe. The people who work in the buildings are really truly heroes in this process, and they are the ones that we need to listen very carefully to about any fears that they might have, and I just applaud their efforts, and thoughts and prayers of everyone should be with them this morning as they welcome the children to their classroom. So at this time, any of the four of us will be available for questions. You might want to step up here because I think probably Police Chief Jordan and Police Chief Ruddick will handle the bulk of those questions.
Communication is always a key issue in a crisis, whether it's a school shooting or a tornado or whatever. Can the Tulsa Public Schools officers communicate with Tulsa Police Dispatch and vice versa in that situation?
Well, I'm going to let Chief Ruddick, make sure that I answer this correctly. But recently, the Tulsa Public Schools Board of Education approved a contract with the Tulsa Police Department that allows for instant computer-aided communication. Chief Ruddick, I'll let you follow up on that.
Actually, we have two systems in place. The first system is already operational and has been operational for quite some time. We do have interoperable radio communication directly with Tulsa police officers in the event that they need to speak with our officers directly at the schools or with my dispatcher or vice versa. We go to a certain frequency for that, or they switch over to a frequency. So we have that interoperable communication capability. But as Dr. Ballard alluded to, we've made a significant investment. In fact, it's about $70,000 with grant money that we were afforded from the Department of Justice to purchase a computer-assisted dispatch system that is the same program type and the same software and the same provider as the City of Tulsa. So you're going to see in the future the ability for our dispatchers at Tulsa Public Schools to see live exactly what the same dispatchers are seeing with the City of Tulsa. What's really significant about this is not only does it maximize resources to any one position where there is an emergency, but it also eliminates duplicate calls, where we're not sending 5 or 6 officers to a location because we get multiple calls and one officer would do the job. So it's maximizing our resources, and we're very excited about that.
I just would like to follow up and say, and Chief Ruddick alluded to this, in the bond issue approved by the citizens of Tulsa in 2010, the $354 million bond issue, there was a significant amount of money that was in that bond issue for safety and security. And in most places, those measures have been carried out. We still have a schedule to further increase security at each of the schools. Also would say that in addition to having a full-time police department at Tulsa Public Schools, that we also have a director of emergency management. That started out as a grant position. When the grant ran out, my recommendation to the school board was, let's make that a full-time position in Tulsa Public Schools. That individual is present in the audience today, and his responsibilities every day are to think about emergency preparedness and how we would react to an emergency situation. Other questions?
Chief Jordan, with a plan recently uncovered similar to the Connecticut one just in Bartlesville, up 70 Highway 75, does it make it scary that this could happen anywhere, and even in our backyard? It doesn't discriminate anywhere in the United States.
Absolutely. And this is one of the key factors in preventing these things is gathering information before this happened, recognizing people who are having emotional issues, who are talking about doing things like that. We've got to encourage our the students and the families and everybody in our community, when they hear or see something like this, these problems starting to evolve, behavior that's just off-center, to tell somebody. And that's what happened in Bartlesville, and they did an outstanding job of preventing what could have been just as horrific a tragedy up there.
Have metal detectors been considered for the school districts?
From time to time, every time that we go through an issue with firearms, there is a discussion about metal detectors. Let me tell you that using metal detectors as an example, hardware, equipment, locking doors are not the best investment of limited funds. The best investment for protecting children is personnel. More teachers who can develop better relationships with children, better relationships with parents, where the information, as Chief Jordan alluded to, comes in so that you collect information. That's the key. There is no place any more intimidating with its equipment and razor wire and bars and armed guards than a prison. But I don't think anybody wants to spend the night in a prison. They don't think it's safe. And I don't want to turn schools into prisons. What I want really is I want an investment from the community that says teachers and an effective teacher and an effective principal are the key to keeping kids educated and safe. They go together. And that's where I would like to see most of our dollars spent, is in the classroom with teachers.
When you get that information and you get those tips coming in, what is the process that you all go through to maybe sort some of the evidence and everything?
We collect a lot of tips. In fact, we have a program here at Tulsa Public School called Awarity, which is a tips hotline. It's completely anonymous if the person wants it to remain that way. We have a good relationship with the Crime Commission, with Carol Bush. All that information comes in. If we believe that there is a threat that we need the assistance of the Tulsa Police Department on, I don't have any reservation about contacting them and including them so that they come in. But we deal with a lot of threats, and the vast majority of those, the overwhelming majority of those, are baseless. They're rumors. And so rather than trying to run around trying to chase ghosts, we try to do what we can to make sure that there's some facts based on these threats before we start locking down a school or start searching. But if you have seen our protocols in the past, we typically will lock down a school when we see that there's a threat, and do what we can to contain that threat inside the building, and then take measures to eliminate it. I would want to mention to you that this year to this point, we have not recovered a single firearm in any Tulsa public school. Now, that's not been the trend in the past. We've recovered firearms. You're well aware of that. But there have been steps continually taken that increase the security presence, as well as developing relationships with children, so that we're privy to that information, so that this year, up to this point, we're doing much better. And I feel really good about it.
I am pleased that Chief Ruddick mentioned our tipster hotline, because that's exactly what I was going to step up a minute ago and talk about, because a couple of years ago we recommended to the Board of Education that we put that hotline in, and we had extensive discussion at the board table publicly about that. And Chief Ruddick is exactly right. It's having mechanisms in place, having avenues available that we can receive information. And so a lot of this is about training, and we go through extensive training. I believe that every single person who works in Tulsa Public Schools knows what they are to do in an emergency. Lockdowns are not unfamiliar to our schools. We have highly trained personnel, and if anything even happens in the neighborhood, because of our excellent communication strategies, we will enter into a lockdown, and I receive information about that on any given day. We could have a lockdown as precautionary, but you never know whenever it's the real situation. So having personnel who are highly trained, having avenues of communication available is an extremely important part of this.
Now, moving forward, can you talk to us about what parents will see will be the security changes that you plan on making, if there's anything that they will notice?
I think what they will notice, and I'm going to let Chief Jordan or Ruddick finish this off, I think what they will notice is an increased presence from the Tulsa Police Department. I would say, you can never be totally foolproof, but I would say that we have good procedures in place. We have good communication avenues that are open. Our personnel are well trained, but I think because of this situation, what you will see is an increased presence with Tulsa Police Department. I'll let Chief Jordan.
As far as visible changes, yes, absolutely. That's what you'll see, I think, is more police officers around schools. I hope the parents will know that police officers have come by their school, the beat officers come by to visit with educators and students and offer any advice, assistance, let them know they're there. But it's going to be, I think it'll be visible to parents and to teachers for sure.
Does that start today?
It'll start today, yes.
Do you intend to put an officer at all these elementary schools where there are no officers now?
No, we don't have enough officers to do that, just to be quite frank. Not saying they're not going to go there, but they may not spend they won't spend the entire day there.
And will there be a period of time when those officers will be around, or will you stop sending those officers in a month or two, or when the threat's gone?
I think this is going to be something while we're looking at reassessing all the security procedures in the school. We'll see probably at the end of 30 days. But I hope that this also will encourage our teachers to call our police officers in and get advice, our administrators in each school. And I think they're going to be around a lot more, regardless of whether they're assigned there or not.
One thing that I might hope you emphasize is communication. Again, looking at what happened in Bartlesville just recently, that communication between the students, the teachers, the parents, then to the appropriate administrators and eventually the police department, that element of communication and collaboration is our responsibility as parents, teachers, administrators, students, etc. If we have any doubt that there's a problem with someone's intentions and motives, we need to immediately call and get hold of somebody. That initial communication is extremely important for the administrations and then eventually the police departments to get involved and to stop a problem before it becomes a problem. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on what Chief Jordan has said here and Emery's question, because this is a significant contribution and commitment on the part of the Tulsa Police Department. And I hope you realize just how significant that is. The Tulsa Police Department is pulled in every which direction by a number of needs in this community. Everybody believes that they need a police officer. I'm sure every business would like to have a police officer sitting and doing their reports in their parking lot. To make that commitment is important because it shows the priority that schools and children have with the city of Tulsa and the Tulsa Police Department. It's also significant because if you'll research school shootings, you'll find that there's not been a single elementary or secondary public school that has ever endured or encountered an active shooter scenario where there's been an armed, uniformed, sworn police officer present. That hard target of the police officer in the police car is one of the most effective deterrents to violence. So then that would beg the question, why don't we just put a police officer at every school? Well, financially, ladies and gentlemen, that's just not feasible. Where's the best use of limited dollars? In an education environment, the best use of limited dollars is on those programs that can give you the most bang for your buck, lower the risk, and can increase the services to students through teachers. If you want to make kids feel safe, it starts with a smiling, effective teacher in a classroom. Each one of you has probably had a relationship with a teacher that impacted your life. That's where it starts. So if we're going to use limited dollars, which we have, in investing in children's safety and security for the future, it starts with a teacher.
What can the community do in order to effectively ask where they can get more dollars to come in? Because you say limited dollars. Dr. Ballard, I know that you have been working very hard to bring funds into the Tulsa Public School District so that way these kind of problems will not arise, but they're here. So what can the community do to make sure that those who are sitting in places where these decisions can be made, money can come out so that way this problem will not come up again?
Thank you for asking that question. I don't think we can ever ensure that this kind of a problem will not occur again. But funding for Oklahoma schools really is a very difficult issue. And it's not been until parents and citizens became involved in that process that the legislators and government officials really began to take seriously the issue of school funding. I've stood right here in this in this very room and talked to so many of you about school finance, about the fact that Tulsa Public Schools has lost $22 million over a 3-year period, and when revenues came back, no additional dollars were sent to schools. I hope that changes, because really having enough personnel in a school is extremely important, and that means teachers, that means aides, and yes, it means a well-funded police department. So I would just call on the citizens to engage in this process and say, we think that school funding is important. Now let me follow up on a statement that was made a while ago about police departments, and there is an excellent relationship between the city and Tulsa Public Schools, an excellent relationship between Chief Ruddick and between and Chief Jordan. But let me say this, 5 years ago, the Tulsa Public Schools Board of Education made a difficult and a significant decision when they said, we're going to have a police department at Tulsa Public Schools. Thanks to federal dollars, we were able to start that program with a federal grant. So not always are federal dollars something negative, because with that kind of a grant, the Board of Education made a decision to have a police department. They made that decision right before I came on board as superintendent. I cannot begin to tell you how thankful I am that there is a police department with the leadership of trained professionals like Gary Ruddick. He is an excellent police chief. He has 23 certified police officers who serve on his staff. I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am that that decision was made 5 years ago, that there is a police department. And that's exactly why, when all of this happened on Friday and people began to ask the questions, we wanted the public to know that your children are as safe as can possibly be. And that's why we wanted our chief of police to be the one on camera assuring people in his very calm, competent manner that the students are as safe as possible. So we have a lot of really good things in place. Other questions?
Chief Jordan and Chief Reddick, Texas has talked about allowing its teachers to have a weapon inside their classroom. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's completely a legislative and political issue to be dealt with by somebody else. It all comes down to how you qualify the people that are allowed to carry guns. There's a lot of different factors. I couldn't make a blanket statement that that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think there's too many other factors. Done correctly, it could have some preventative effect.
Chief Jordan, you say heightening control with the help of TPD is to assess security and everything. But is it also to make sure that there are no copycats or no people who get ideas here locally?
We want to stop it, whether it's somebody with their own original thought or a copycat, either way. But it's right now. This is something that we want the people we're protecting to see us there. We also want to see anybody that might have any thoughts like that to see us there as well.
If there are no further questions, I would like to thank you for your participation in today's event. I think it is critical that we make it clear to parents and to the public that we are doing everything we possibly can through communication with personnel, through paying attention to all communication that we receive, the procedures already in place. We are doing everything we possibly can to ensure that the children who came to Tulsa Public Schools this morning will be safe. It is one of our top priorities. It is also a top priority of the city. We appreciate the relationship that we have with the city and thank them for their immediate reaction to this situation in heightening that relationship to ensure the safety of our kids. Thank you for being here today.